Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Hey, Youth Worker Nation, this is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire. And hey, I'm at PodFest. You may not want to start a podcast or anything like that, but let me tell you, you're going to want this information. I met Jessica Hurley yesterday. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
And we were all being introduced in this particular event, and she says, hey, I want to talk to you. She is the fastest internet person I think I've ever met. She says, I went ahead and looked you up, and it was like 5 seconds. I don't know how she did all that.
It's a millennial thing.
It's a millennial thing. There you go. And so found out she's with AMIKids, and I'm going to let her tell you about that. And now, you've got your own podcast too, is that right?
I do, that's correct.
Yeah, that's right. And so, some people, they're here, they don't have podcasts, they're trying to, or they're doing it for somebody else. And so you've got your own podcast. But here's what I want you to do. Catch us up to date. Give us a little bit about your history and who you are and where you are now, and then tell us about AMIKids.
Absolutely. A little bit about myself. Mm-hmm. My name is Jessica Hurley. I'm 28 years old. I live in Tampa, Florida currently. And I work for a national nonprofit called AMIKids. And for the last, I would say, since I was about 16 years old, last 10 years, I've spent my life working for at-risk youth. It is by far my favorite thing to do. I wouldn't choose to do anything else besides a nighttime podcast.
Yeah.
And I just truly believe the way we pay rent on this earth is by service to others, and especially the youth. We're breeding them, we're raising them. They're our next generation, and if we don't invest in them, the expectations, will be lower than what we're doing right now. Oh
my gosh, did I give you a script or something? I mean, it sounds like something I've said 1,000 times and believe in, and that's just amazing. Keep going, though. Tell us more.
So I started out working I grew up and was raised in a rec center. My mentor that I met there is the one that saved my life. And so I forever felt indebted to do the same work. And I thought for the rest of my life, I'll work in a rec center. I just want to let a bunch of kids run around a rec center and be the person that has the keys to the door, and I'll be happy with life.
Oh, my goodness.
And I actually went to college for Recreation and Leisure Services Administration. And people always go, what is that?
And you paid money for that?
Yes.
Right.
And the only reason I did it was because I thought I was going to run like a county recreation and parks department rec center.
Oh my goodness.
And I did do that. I did it for about a year out of college, and then it didn't pay the bills, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So I started applying for nonprofits, and I ended up at another nonprofit where I actually had a blast. I got to create a high school program, which was like Pathways to Success, to teach kids to get into college and just expose them, for that matter, which was the key to it, was they didn't know what was available to them. And then I went from there. I ended up running a YouthBuild program, which is a program for 18 to 24-year-olds involved in the juvenile and adult system, dropped out of high school, need a second, third, fourth opportunity, and they can actually get their GED and get construction training.
Yes, your Teen's Crazy book, though, and he talks about the adolescence goes all the way to 25 for guys. So when, Jessica, you're talking about that, we're still talking an adolescent mindset. Welcome to adult world. You've been out 3 years now. I'm
Absolutely.
joking.
No, seriously.
Girls is 22
right.
on the average, but
no, seriously. And it's so funny that you say that, because that's the same exact way funding sources describe youth. So working with Department of Labor, Department of Justice, Department of Education, they actually consider 14 to 24 youth, and 14 to 16, or now 14 to 18 is considered younger youth, and 18 to 24 is considered older youth.
Wow.
So it's very direct with what you just explained, is that a lot of the 22, 23, 4-year-olds are still behind. And the best example I ever heard...
We sweep them away. They're adults, according to the law, so sweep them away.
Yes, 17 and 362 days, we tell you to raise your hand and go to the bathroom, and 365 days after 17, we tell you need to get a job, you need to pay rent, and you need to be responsible for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's insane. And the best example I ever heard was for students that drop out of high school, that whatever age they drop out, that's the exact age they stay until they begin being educated again.
There's something about the brain, even though it's a physiological fix on those averages for those age genders. There is something, and I haven't really done the research. You obviously know about that research about why they basically, it's almost like they deform their own brain by that stalemate.
Absolutely. And so it's always been my goal and my purpose to expose them to those other opportunities. I think exposure is key.
It is.
Majority of them get behind because they don't know what's available to them. It's not necessarily, forgive my language, but kids are not stupid. They're not born stupid. They're not, they may make stupid decisions, but it's based on what they're exposed to and what they believe their opportunities are.
Yeah.
So, I did YouthBuild for a little while, which was one of my favorites because I got to be called crazy, and I was crazy because I knocked on house doors and
oh my goodness,
called them at 6 a.m. to make sure that they were coming to school, and it was my favorite because that type of to build trust with youth, you have to have that type of love and obsession
for their success. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you're knocking on their door and they're whining and complaining to you and you keep getting them out, they go, she cared enough to listen to my whining and complaining.
Exactly. And that's when they begin to trust you. When they trust you, they'll take your word for it. And they believe that you care about their success, and they'll start taking those steps towards a better life.
Finally, somebody believes in them.
That's the coolest part. That's the part I love the most. So after that, I got an offer to work for AMIKids, which was my goal through all of this. Was I was helping kids for so long and realized I loved it so much. I finally started to wonder how I could help more. And I kind of wanted to be in the role where I trained the people that worked with the kids, because I felt like I love them so much. I can teach people to love them as much as I do,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I do at AMIKids. But working with kids this long and at-risk youth, there's only one reason and one reason only that I was not like them and did not end up in those circumstances. And it was a mentor.
Yeah.
It was definitely a mentor.
There you go.
I was arrested 5 times before I was 19.
Oh my.
Yep. So I was that youth.
Yeah, you're the one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time now that the only reason that had nothing to do with who I was at all. It was how I was led and how I was fed at that time. And it was not by my parents. I had no morals. I was led by the wrong group of people, and I was fed by materialistic things and poor relationships.
Tell me about those relationships. Get as specific as you can. These are adults that we're talking to here that work with anything from, mine was proactive. How can we, my main level was proactive. Many of the guys I worked with, we had divisions in Youth for Christ, where Campus Life and I started there in Central Florida, then was in a church for 29 years. You deal with a little bit of everything at that point, but we were very specialized. Campus Life was the group that tried to take students and keep them from being at risk. And then we had my buddy, Dr. Gordon Greenhold, who's Dr. Gordon Greenhold now. We were all in our 20s, and he and some other guys would go inner city Orlando, bring them out, bring them to the center, go to the juvie centers and all that stuff. So I understand both sides of that. A little bit, they understand it more. So tell us more about that. Get as specific as you can. Tell us about that one person that just flipped that negative switch.
I think there's a million things I could say about what that mentor did to change things for me. But if I could bring it all down to one word, it was expectations and expectations and accountability.
They're the ones who brought you out.
Yes, my mentor.
Tell me about the person that flipped that first switch to make you go negative. And what that circumstance was.
Absolutely. Probably my cousin. I had a cousin that at the time I remember being 13, and she was just so cool and everyone liked her and she was so popular.
Yeah.
And she cared about nothing. She cared about popularity. She cared about wearing nice things, whether she stole it or had to beg for money or get money, however, to get it. And I just loved her image. And I remember being 13 and I was not cool and I was not liked and I was kind of chunky and nobody really paid attention to me, and I wasn't super smart either. So there was no reason at the time for me to get a lot of attention. And everything about her, I just wanted to be, and I was willing to do anything to be in that space and be in her group.
Yes.
And I think my first mistake was, she told me I needed cool clothes, and it was because of the clothes I wore that I was not cool. And so we went to a mall, and she said, you need to wear these types of things. And I said, I don't have the money. And she said, it's not a problem. We're going to steal it. And she said, I do it all the time. It's no big deal. And I was like, I remember being scared to death. And she just talked me into it like it was, I do this every week. Like it was no big deal.
Right. Just be cool and you'll be all right.
And I did it. And of course, we got caught.
Of course.
Ended up in Duval County jail, or not jail, but at the time, like a holding cell. And they tried to scare the life out of us. And then my cousin even talked me into lying about my name and said they would just send us home later, and they didn't.
Oh my goodness.
So we ended up staying overnight.
So she was in there with you. They caught both of you.
They caught both of us. It was her and I and our other cousin.
But she was still cool.
She was still cool. She was so cool about it. But it was because at the time her parents weren't involved. She was living with us.
Oh my.
So she only had to deal with my parents and my aunts and uncles. She didn't have to deal with her parents. So she really didn't care what they thought. And I was scared to death. But then when I got out and we got back to school, and everybody thought it was so funny and it was so cool. And so for me, I look back at it and roll my eyes, but it kind of worked. It kind of got people talking to me that back then weren't talking to me.
It's like, oh man, you're cool.
Exactly.
Right.
It's so crazy to say that, and you think about the kids and what they go through now, and it's probably even at a younger age than when I was at 13. I'm imagining that happening to like 9 and 10 year olds now.
Right.
But it made me cooler, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And after that, I think I started hanging with what I considered then a much more popular crowd. And I got into, hanging out with people that wanted to skip school. Truancy was a big thing. And at the time, my parents were so busy, they didn't notice. I was just deleting the voicemails from the school when I got home.
Oh my goodness, you're very smart. See, you're smart. People thought you weren't smart.
Right.
And here's what I tell people, and you know this. All of us have areas of genius, and those areas of genius come out during stress and things that you want in life if you're really motivated. And so whatever people think, the school system only judge about 5 levels of genius. The rest of us are idiots according to school systems, right? And so, but there's more levels of genius, and we're finding more and more and more. And one of yours was you knew how to adapt.
Absolutely. I definitely knew how to adapt. It's funny you say that because I remember all my friends always calling me when they got caught and saying, tell me what to say to my parents. What do I say? How do I get out of this? I was like the perfect story creator for everybody to get out of their trouble.
Yeah. Keep going. Go ahead.
Sorry. So after that, I remember getting talked into smoking marijuana, which here's the really odd part. My parents were huge pot smokers.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're dealing with some of that too.
Yes. Alcoholics as well.
All right.
More my father than my mother. So clearly, it wasn't just my peers, it was my parents as well. But if you think about the youth we serve, majority of them are in the same situations at home.
Absolutely.
As well as what they're surrounded by.
Yeah. And it's not just at-risk kids that we know are at risk that are dealing with parents that because their parents are from those generations passed down from the 60s.
Right. And so here's the thing. I tell people this all the time. It's the funniest part to me is that I'd known my parents were pot smokers since I was like 11, but they had sold it to me like it was so normal. They were like, everyone does it. Your teacher probably does it. The person at the grocery store, they justified it to me. So until I was like 17 was I finally like, oh, no one else's parents does it? I thought it was completely normal. And they had always told me, like, if you want to smoke with us, you can just do it at home kind of thing. And I was too scared to. And then when I realized my friends did it and they thought it was cool, I started to do it with my parents. Sure. I remember coming to school and half of the classes I was super,
You were baked, as
I was
they call it.
baked, right.
Yeah.
And at this point, to all my friends, I had the coolest life ever because I could do whatever I wanted. And the main people that everyone was worried about, my parents didn't care. They were like, you're passing school. This is great. Like,
right. As long as you get through school, you're
just
out of
don't
jail,
have a baby and get a high school diploma. Like,
right.
You have a job, you pay for your car. This is great. Like, this works.
Life is awesome.
Yes. And at that point, I was high up on the chain. I was one of the most popular people in school. I had 2 jobs.
Goodness.
I was dressing however I wanted. I was, smoking marijuana whenever I wanted, coming to school. But at the same time, I had found a passion for serving kids.
Wow.
So when I was 16, I got a job at a rec center, and I had met a woman that was running the rec center when I was 10 and playing basketball there. And when I saw her at 15, I was like, oh, I remember her. And she was so nice to me and I loved her. And I started working for her at 16, and she put me to work.
Oh, wow.
I was running her after school programs. I was cleaning the gym, and we just developed a relationship. Now, so at the same time, simultaneously, we're building a relationship, but I'm still doing bad stuff at night. So it's kind of twofold,
You got 2 worlds.
I got 2 worlds.
At least 2.
Yeah, and a few more. But I see something in her that I could possibly be and that I really enjoy because I get to sit around her and be myself. She doesn't judge me. There's still some things I don't tell her, but she likes me. She thinks I'm a good person. And then I go home and I do my crazy stuff at night.
Yeah.
And she started to promote me and push me and wanted me to do more and said I was great with the kids. And I finally kind of started realizing I had to make a choice. And when I was 17, I got in a fist fight in high school. And I was arrested, and so was the young lady in the school. Oh. And I remember her calling me. I had already come home. My father had already told me, she hit you first, no big deal. And I remember her calling me, and I remember the fear going through my body of her calling me and me having to explain to her what happened. And it was moments like that I could tell you a million stories like that, that expectation kicked in. I didn't have that at home. I had no expectation for behavior because the bare minimum was fine with my parents.
Yeah.
But for my mentor, who we had just started building a relationship, it was like, what is wrong with you? You're built to be way better than this. And these type of things will get you nowhere. And just having to explain myself to her was the scariest thing on earth. Because
it wasn't like the principal. You didn't care about the principal. Go away. You'll be gone.
Yep.
But here's this lady that's intersected in your life. You see a long-term relationship with this lady or this mentor. It's a lady, right? So
yes, a woman. Yep.
Yeah. And so... keep going. Let's hear more about that now.
So this is what happens. I get in this fight. I'm going into my senior year in high school. I'm working for her at this point. I'm running another center for her in the afternoons. Wow. So I'm still bad, and I'm running a youth center for her in the afternoons when I get out of school. So I'm leaving high school an hour early, running a center for her in the toughest neighborhood where I'm from in St. Augustine, West Augustine area. And so she comes to me towards the middle of my senior year of high school while I'm at work, says she comes to audit me, comes at the end of the day and says, you did such a great job. Everything in the program is smooth. Like, this is really your thing. When do you leave for college? And I was like, I'm not going to college. And she was like, what? And I said, how? My parents don't have any money. I don't even know how to go to college. And she was like, what? I mean, everything out of her mouth was like, what is wrong with you? And I was so blown away because I hadn't even talked to anyone about college.
And nobody's talked to you about college.
I'm in my senior year of high school, and I promise. She goes, what is your GPA? And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, what? And so literally she's like, come to my house tomorrow. And she spends 6 hours educating me on why my GPA is important and why college is important and this and that, and go home and talk to your parents, and I'll spend the money on your application fees, and you have to do this. And I'm like, so I go home excited because now I have a new goal, and I haven't had a goal in forever.
Oh, what's that?
Right.
Goal is what are we doing tonight?
Right, exactly. What are we doing tonight? So I go home and tell my parents, and I'll never forget this. And sometimes I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But my dad goes, well, we can't afford college, and I don't know why you're trying to run away from your problems. So if you think that's a good idea, then whatever, but I can't give you any money for that. So I think it's kind of stupid. Oh, and he goes, and you work for the county and you're 17 years old. You could work there 10 more years and probably retire. Who gets a job at the county and leaves? Like, you should probably stay. So disappointed. I go back to my mentor again. She's like, what? Your dad doesn't want, whose parents don't want them to go to college? Kids get kicked out of their houses for not going to college. And I'm like,
That's right.
well, I don't know. And he said we didn't have the money. And she's like, that's the best part. The broker you are, the better. You can go to college that way. And I'm like, I'm clueless. And so from that point on, the craziest thing happened. She goes, she muffled on a little bit. We were at work and she came back to me at the end of the day and she goes, how do you feel about moving in with me? And I was like, let me think about it. And she was like, I just can't believe your father doesn't believe in you enough to go to college. I want you to move in with me. We're going to make this happen. And I said, okay. And I went and told my parents and I moved out a week later.
Oh, wow.
And I moved in with her before I turned 18. And she told me, well, this is what she did for me. So I ended up living with her for 2.5 years and I did community college because when I moved in with her, we applied for 5 colleges and I got into none.
Problem.
Well, I was okay. I was average. I just was okay at school. So I had a 3.0.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yeah. Which, you need like a 3.5 to go to college.
You were a genius. You were baked at night.
Yeah. I was smart with that. I don't know.
Exactly.
It worked for me.
Genius.
So I 3.0 average. I didn't get into any and I was super disappointed. And she was like, no, you're going to go to community college. I'm going to help you through it. And by help, she meant hold me accountable. Mm-hmm. She did not help me with anything,
right.
Which at the time I remember hating her for. Mm-hmm. I was like, this woman now thinks she's my mom. Mm-hmm. She's always asking me, did I do my homework? Like then she's asking me, did I study for my test? And then she wants to cook and help me study. Like, leave me alone. Cause I'd never had someone on top of me like this before.
No time to be bad.
Yeah. I'd come home at midnight and she'd follow me in the room and say, don't you have a test tomorrow? What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with somebody being on top of me like this. But I got to a point where those expectations meant something to me and that accountability really held me accountable. I would show up and take a test and then bomb it and be like, how am I going to tell her that I know this is my fault? How am I going to tell her that I've gotten into college? Now I'm taking a test. I'm failing because I went out last night. Like, this is getting embarrassing. And I just saw that she was at the time when I moved in with her, she was 29. She owned her own home, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. She was letting me live.
She was 29. Wow.
She was the bomb.com. I'm telling you. And she ran the recreation and parks department for youth.
Yeah. Can you tell us her name?
Yeah. Her name's Jamie Bakari. Right now she's like the regional adult and youth director for St. Johns County Recreation and Parks Department. I might have said her title wrong. But she was everyone in St. Augustine, where I'm from, knows her as the youth.
Oh my goodness.
The youth person. She's the one with the keys to the county rec department where everybody played basketball. Everybody hung out there after school.
She gave hope to an area.
She gave hope to our entire community. And if you knew her, she was hard on you and she didn't care. But the hardest on me, for sure. Everyone would see her come to my house and they would say, why do you let her talk to you like she's your mom? Because she would yell. She's a short little Italian woman and she definitely has like that short woman syndrome. So it was talking was yelling and it was never soft.
What do you mean it's loud?
Yeah, it was always harsh. And then that's coming from my parents who are hippies that are everything slow and calm and quiet and be quiet. You're being too loud. And it was very much a shift in my lifestyle. But I realized I liked it because there were moments where I realized I was definitely becoming a better person, and I was getting promotions with working with her. And then let me tell you about working, living, and being mentored by the same person. I couldn't be sick. I mean, if I tried to go out too late and then tell her I didn't want to come to work, it was like, no, get your butt to work now. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, the success story lies in her being on top of me like that. I lived with her for 2 years. I got my AA degree. She made me apply for all 5 colleges again. I got into all 5. And
I go, see?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember her looking at me and saying, now this is success. I'll take you to all 5 and let you choose because you earned it. And I was like, and we ended up only choosing 2 for me to visit. She wouldn't let me go to Miami because she said it was trouble for me. Yeah. So
makes sense. Right.
I visited UCF and Florida State.
So University of Miami was one of your
possibles. No, I wish. It was FIU. Okay. It was Florida International University. Okay. I got into Florida State. I got into University of Central Florida. I got into University of North Florida in Jacksonville. And
great schools.
USF.
All great
Yep.
schools.
And with my A degree, with the 2 years I lived with her. So at that point, I knew I had made a substantial change because I went from not even considering college to getting an AA degree and now getting into big, if you live
Big
in Florida,
U's.
those are big U's, right?
Yeah.
So I visited University of Central Florida and Florida State and fell in love with Florida State, went to Florida State.
Beautiful place.
So you would think, based on this story, that I went to Florida State and I had it all figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had lived 2 years with this crazy Italian mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I understood accountability. I understood expectations now. And I understood in college, I was scared to death. I was like, I got to sit in the front row or else I'm not going to make it. I have to do this right. I was so scared of her. And then I was there 2 months and I got a DUI.
Oh.
Yep.
Trouble finds you.
Yeah, it finds me. It finds me. And so I was actually home for Thanksgiving. So I wasn't in Tallahassee. I'd come home 2 months later for Thanksgiving, DUI, Thanksgiving night. And I remember, I remember going to jail. You can't get out that night. You can't be bonded out because it's a holiday. And so I stayed the night, and I remember my mom coming to get me, and then they wouldn't let me out because I couldn't blow under the legal limit the next morning. They made me stay a whole nother day. And I remember just sitting there like, this is what she talked about. You can't go to college. And I'm just giving the example of college, but this is with anything in life. You can't earn something great and expect to maintain it being two different people. And I'll never forget, later on, I ended up going to court for it. The judge wanted to nail me to the wall because it was my 5th arrest. And he said, I think I'm going to give you 21 days and I'm going to put a breathalyzer on your car until you graduate college, which he did. I never drank in college again.
I betcha.
I did, but never to the level that I did with that thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting with the lawyer and her telling me all the fees we had to pay afterwards. And I was just like, I still felt like the victim, which I can openly say that now, but I still felt like a victim. I was like, I can't do anything right. And I don't understand why trouble always finds me. And my mentor looked at me, and I'll never forget this. I say this to myself all the time. She said, you're right. You don't get it. Let me tell you what you don't get is you can't live one way by day and another by night and expect substantial results. It doesn't work that way. It's called integrity. And I was like, so that's why it doesn't work anymore. That's why I can't be successful is because I'm a drinking, hanging out, got to be at every popular thing at night and going to school during the day and just expecting to be the substantial person that loves kids and takes care of kids and guides them in the right direction one day. And I was like, what kind of influence am I? How do I love kids so much and I want to help them so bad and I'm guiding them and I can't even do right by myself. So this is how God works. I've already been helping kids. I'm already working at community centers. I've already been doing this since I was 16.
Yeah.
So now I'm 19 in the county jail for a DUI. And as I'm waiting for my mom to come get me, there's about a peephole this big. And I see a face in the peephole. And she's got like a sad face. And I'm like, who is this? And she cracks open the door. And it is a young lady I helped's mom, a young girl that had been in one of my programs forever. And she opens the door crying. And then so immediately I start crying. And she says, it's okay, honey. I saw your record or your arrest record. She said, it's okay. Everybody drinks. You just got caught. And she goes, I know you're a good person. And she was like, hopefully you learn from this, but I'm not mad at you. We're not mad at you. And it's okay. And I was like, it was right then, it was that expectation. It was that you're helping kids and you don't live by example for a second. Who are you? Who do you want to be? That's who you want to be. That's who you're going to school for. You want to guide these kids. You want to do programs for them. You want to expose them to life. And you can't even live that way yourself. Look at who you're disappointing. And I remember sitting in that jail cell and after talking to her and I said, that's it. That's it. I don't care how hard I have to work to not be that person. I won't be that person again. And it was almost like I put myself on punishment. I remember like doing everything the hard way after that on purpose. I remember I had to take all these classes, these DUI classes, these, drunk moms against drunk moms classes. I had to take therapy because they thought that the legal limit that I was caught at, I was an alcoholic just because I had drank so much. And I remember like making myself walk and catch the bus, even though I had a car or people that would give me rides. And it was just, I remember like, you have to do this. You deserve this. You need to earn back what you want, because you don't deserve it right now. And I remember my mentor telling me, she was pretty harsh. She said, I hope your school kicks you out. I really do, because you don't get it. So I felt like I had to earn it back. And after that, everything changed for me. And it's so funny now, because sometimes my friends call me the most conservative person in the room. And I tell them all the time, because I feel like I'm walking a tightrope to this point. I feel like I have to work extra hard to be the right person in the room.
So with all this happening, this lady, you went to FSU. Obviously, you got your degree.
Yep, I did.
Did you get your master's or just your undergrad?
I got my bachelor's when I was from Florida State when I was 20, graduated at 21, and I recently got my master's at 27 in 2016.
Oh wow! Oh wow! So
in nonprofit management.
And you know what? And youth workers, if they're younger at this, or youth pastors, volunteers, they don't quite get all of this thing, but you had 17 years of practice at doing things wrong.
Absolutely. Over and over.
Said everything wrong is okay.
Yep.
Because everybody does it. You had fake news, false information coming in. And so, you only had a couple of years trying to break loose from this thing. And we know that it takes a lifetime.
Here's what I tell the folks I train all the time. If my mentor would have worked with me from 9 to 5, this would have never happened, ever. Changing someone's life and trajectory and past and what they've been taught for 16, 17 years is from the time your feet touch the ground till the time you go to bed, and then waking up at midnight and calling them and saying, where are you at right now? Because that's what she did for me. She was crazy obsessed about me and everything I did. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but that is how you change a life.
And very few people can do that. Very few people are willing to do that. They can't. They're unwilling to, because it's painful to be that kind of mentor. It's so painful.
And I tell people all the time, it's okay to get burnt out. That's what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
But you have to be obsessed with these kids, and you have to be so transparent and flexible with their failures, because you can't take it personal, their disappointment, because they will disappoint you. They'll almost test you. It's almost like a boyfriend. They'll test the waters and see what they're capable of and what they can do with you. But I promise you, they're dying for that expectation. I was dying for expectation. I was dying for rules. I was dying for structure. I was dying for it. When somebody finally put me in between those two white lines and I realized that I couldn't step out of bounds or I was going to fail, it was pretty easy to go down the right. It's pretty easy to stay on a straight line once I understood, but I never knew what structure was. And that's what my mentor did for me. And you have to be willing to, okay, get back in line. No. Okay, get back in line. No. Come back. Nope, turn back around. We're going to try again because you messed up. You went all the way in a circle. Yeah. Go again. And it has to be this constant. A 9 to 5 would never change a life. Calling somebody once a week would never change a life. I mean, the kids that I mentor now, I text them every morning. I call them. If I don't hear from them for 2 days, I call them, and I tell the people that I train, you have to become obsessed with their life, their surroundings, their understanding, and you have to be there when they need you. And when that means is when they're having a bad day and they go home, you have to be the first person to call them and say, I know today was rough. How are you now at 8 o'clock at night? How are you after dinner? What's going on? What are you up to?
Because it's minute to minute, moment to moment, hour to hour when you're under that kind of pain.
Yeah. And then when you finally, here's where you win with youth. Here's where you win is when you find out that they start calling you before they make bad decisions.
Oh, yeah.
That's when the trust is the strongest. And that's when you can finally get somewhere with them, is when they call you and you just say, well, what's going on? And they say, oh, nothing. I was just calling to talk to you. That means I'm about to do something stupid. Talk me out of it. Yeah. Because I used to do that all the time. I would call my mentor at midnight before I walked in a club. And she'd be like, what are you doing? I'd be like, nothing. Where you at? I'd say, oh, standing outside of so-and-so. Well, if you want to come home, I'll stay up and wait for you, she'd say. I was 19, 20, right, but she would say, I'll wait up on home with you. And I remember there being times where, to me, that sounded more exciting than what I was about to walk into, because I knew I'd go home to somebody that loved me and cared about me and wanted to hear about my day and wanted to know what my next move was. That love and expectation was what I wanted more than anything that I was doing. It was just very hard to make that shift. She trucked me down for it.
I'll tell you what, in Christianity and in churches, we're seldom willing to do that and go that far, by the way. You found that with churches?
Oh my gosh. So it's so funny. Speaking of churches, most of the youth that I've worked with normally do not have a home church, are not involved. And it's whether you're creating the home base for them or their church is creating the home base for them, but they have to feel like there's somewhere where they can be themselves and they've got an outlet.
And not many churches, and this is what I'm trying to help youth pastors see. It's got to be a safe environment. And churches are not safe environments. We call them hospitals because they really are.
Right.
Where people, all of us are hurting, and we're trying to spend time with God and with His people, and there should be safety there. But in churches, there really is not safety. And by the way, youth pastors, I'm not blaming you, not blaming churches. You're full of good people. They're full of good people. But there's false expectations. And so therefore, okay, tell me, I see that look on you. You don't see the look on her face. I saw the look. So tell me about false expectations.
So absolutely. So here's it's the same correlation with this. I used to tell people all the time, they'd say, why are you going to school for that? Why don't you just go to school for education and be a teacher? I don't want to be a teacher. Teachers are the bad guys. I want to be the fun guy. I want to be the person that they come to say, here's all the bad things I did today. What do you think? And I feel like it's...
And you have no legal obligation at that point with the teacher realm and the school system realm, there are many people that want to help students more, but if they tell them something, this means an automatic sheriff, deputy sheriff.
I have to call a sheriff, or I have to call your parent. I don't want to be that person. And I think it's similar, with churches and pastors, and not that they necessarily tell your parent, but there's a expectation level there of, okay, well, now you told me this, and now you need to change because we both know that that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
And by the way, I seldom ever, I've never mentioned this on a podcast. It's still painful. This happened 30 years ago, and that was that I had my Miranda rights read to me in my office because of helping a kid and actually involving the police, but then doing the right thing the wrong way.
What did you do?
I'm not talking about it. But basically, I sought counsel because the sheriff's department, well, I will tell you some of this. The sheriff's department would not tell me the right things. I had to tell the parents to go to the police. The police would not give me help on how to help. And so I went to a counselor and I said, here's XYZ that's happening. Where do I stand? What do I have to do? What should nobody else will tell me? They're leaving me in the dark, but yet I'm involved. And he said, here's what you need to do. It was the right thing and the wrong thing at the right time. And I just happened to have one of my kid students was a lawyer. And he said he got me out of trouble because he was actually worked with the police department on some issues, which is ironic because he's a commercial lawyer. And so, and he says, Doug, he says, how you doing? And I just talked to him the other day. He said, I don't even remember that. He said, how you doing? I said, I'm a little bit shaken up. And I said, but I'm fine. And he said, Doug, legally, whatever you think is right is probably legally wrong to do.
So a million situations like that. But so here's the truth is I didn't want to be the bad guy. And in those communities, police officers, are considered the bad guy, unfortunately. And that's too much controversy to discuss, but with good reason, because those should be the people that make these kids feel safe. And majority of the times they're not. And so as a mentor or a youth worker, I really want those people to be that sounding board for these kids, because the rehabilitation in law enforcement and the juvenile system is just not there. And that's why I work.
And they've been working on this for decades, because I've been dealing with this for decades. And we're not putting policemen down. They're being taught to do. They're under they're under laws themselves to do things, and that comes out wrong a lot of times because they are out of a job. If they do it the way their heart tells them. They have to get rid of their heart while they're doing their job.
Absolutely. And I remember one of the things that I always hear from parents in communities like this is, the police that roam this community don't even live here. And I always hear, back when those people were walking your streets, you knew your local police officer, and they would just say, "Oh, Jessica, go home. Get out of here. Go home. You're being stupid. I'll tell your mom what you're doing right now." And it's not that anymore. I remember police rushing. I remember working at a community center and police rushing our building because they had heard an upset mother of one of the child's mother of one of the boyfriends had called and said that he'd brought a gun to school, and he didn't, but she was trying to get him in trouble. And I mean, they rushed the center 16, 17. And
they have to.
Yeah, they have to. Absolutely. And I understand with great, but everybody ran, and nobody, none of the police officers that I spoke with had ever been to the center before. They didn't know the area. They didn't know the kids. And it's just, if it had been people that were, knew the community and knew the kids, and I think it would have just been a much different situation. My kids were scared to death. They were in a panic, even though they had done nothing wrong. They had nothing in their possession.
The first thing they knew was to run
and scared to death. And I was like, it's okay. And they were like, so because of things like that, the things that I've seen, and the majority of the kids I've met that arrested 5, 6, 7, 9 times before they're 19. It's like once you're in the system, you're forever in the system.
Yeah.
And then the only reason that they do know you is because you have a rap sheet, and you can't really stay out of trouble after that. It's almost impossible. And I don't mean to call victim on some of these kids. They do make poor decisions. I made poor decisions, but there are people out there looking for them to make mistakes, and it's very easy when the expectation or the assumption is there that you are going to make a mistake again very soon, because it's your normal. And so that's why I work for AMIKids, is because the organization works diligently to give 100% of youth that have been involved in the juvenile system a second chance, and not treated like they are menace to society, that they have made these mistakes that can never be reversed. It's giving them a second chance, rehabilitating them with therapy, with licensed therapists, with vocational trades, with training them on things that they can get employed with, and then behavioral therapy with everything from cannabis to anger to all of the things that they deal with, whether they're too mad at mom at home or they can't stop smoking weed, and why these things are important and why you can't return to society with these issues.
Tell me the good experiences you've had with churches working with you and the bad experiences.
Absolutely. So are you familiar with Young Life?
Oh, yeah.
So all in between that mess, between 16 to 20, I fell in love with 2 Young Life leaders. And I went to Young Life diligently. That was an obsession where I was from, because it was probably one of the coolest things to do.
Yes.
That was the only type of youth groups we had. And so I fell in love with 2 young ladies. And if I were to say that they didn't give me the world to try to change me, I even went to Young Life camp one year.
Yeah.
I think it was when I was 15. It was before I could drive. And loved it. But because of the home I grew up in, my parents weren't anti, but they did not go to church. I had never gone to church. I knew nothing about it. And every time I got in that facility or that vicinity, I felt stupid. I felt uneducated. I felt like there was...
Uneducated. Youth workers, listen to that. I had a young lady to come up to me when I was working Campus Life, which is similar to Young Life. She's a junior in high school. She is a honor student. And she says, I'd like to have a meeting with you. I said, oh, okay. I took for granted she was like the other church kids that she's with, but we were there for both. That's what Campus Life, Young Life's for, to go beyond what normal churches can do. So we prayed over breakfast, and I said, Margot, what do you want? What? She says, my parents never took us to church. They felt like that there are differences with what churches were too much, so we never went. I grew up. I have no idea what Christmas is. I do not know what Easter is. My friends all do these things, and I just feel stupid, and can you help me?
That's it.
Yeah.
When I was, my neighbor took me when I was 12. And I remember I met the coolest youth pastor to this day. Every time I see him, I get so excited. And he explained the story of Jesus to me. And I remember crying my eyes out. I was bawling because I had never heard it before. And he asked me if I wanted to be saved. And of course I said yes, because I was just in awe at the time.
Yeah.
And, but then because my neighbor took me, I never went back. And I lived so far from the church, I never went back. So I have a million stories like that. I think I went back to church at 16. I went to Young Life when I was 15. I started going to Young Life often. And then I tried church again when I was in college. And then, I met someone 2 years ago. They got me very, very involved with a church that I love in Tampa called Radiant Church. And I finally started doing some research and learning about the Bible. And it's so funny because I promise you what kept me from reading the Bible was, one, every time I opened it, it didn't make sense to me. So I would read a page and stop. And I understood Young Life. That made sense. But I couldn't compare it to the stuff I was reading in the Bible. And two was I would sit in a room and see that there was an 8-year-old that understood more than me. And that just messed me up.
Oh yeah.
And it's almost like, I'm sure this is what youth probably feel like. This is what I felt like. It's such a term that's overused with kids now, is I felt fake. I felt like I was sitting in the church listening to someone and they're saying, raise your hand, say amen if this means something to you. And I'm going, this is great, but it doesn't mean anything to me because I don't even get it.
Right.
I don't understand.
Churchese is what we called it. Speaking churchese, yeah.
Right. And I'm going, how is there an 8-year-old in here saying amen? And I don't even know who Jacob is. Like it was
Jacob who?
Yeah.
Does he live around the block? Who is this guy?
Who's Jacob? Is this the pastor's name? I'm so confused.
Yeah.
And it's ignorance, but because I didn't understand and I was embarrassed that I didn't know as much as kids that were in, youth or children's church, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want to not know when I was supposed to stand up. I didn't want to not know who they were talking about. I remember my Young Life leader being one of the people that made me feel the most comfortable. She wouldn't even push me. She would always sit next to me and say, how do you feel about tonight? What are your thoughts on tonight? Even if I said I didn't get it, she would say, it's okay. We'll go back and we'll try again. It's so funny because the woman that I've met 2 years ago is very similar to my Young Life leader. And it's the very part I've always appreciated most about Christian people is just not being judgy of the fact that I don't know anything and then letting me be vulnerable and ask really stupid questions. I remember asking questions like, I hope people don't laugh, but I never grew up in church. So I would ask questions like, so who found this book? Like, who wrote this? And why, how do people actually know that happened to Jesus? Like, how do people know that? And I would always ask my friend the question, and the same thing I would ask my Young Life leader, like, well, how does Jesus talk to you? People always say that God talks to them or God told them or, when did that person, I don't get it.
It's bizarre.
I've never heard God say anything to me. I've never heard him, and just them not even flinching and saying, well, let me tell you what that feels like. It's actually, you don't actually hear it. You feel it. You get the feeling in your body and you know that it's a feeling from God and just explaining it to me in a way that I didn't at all feel like I asked a stupid question was what brought me closer.
Yes.
Or bringing passages out of the Bible that applied to my life was what really made me want to be more resourceful and want to understand the Bible more. Was saying like, well, this happened to you yesterday. And there's this verse in the Bible that reminded me of what happened to you yesterday. And here it is. And this is what Jacob says, or this is what Joseph says. And I would be like, they kind of knew this was going to happen all along. and it made me want to get more involved. And one of the best things I ever did, and I wish I had done it in my younger life, but I didn't. I did it in my adult life, was fast and prayer. And that's what made me really, really understand was when I got off of social media, I fasted and prayed every day. And I remember there was a time where I was scared to pray. I wouldn't pray out loud. I was so scared that I would say something stupid. People would pray. If you put me when I was a young kid at Young Life and you stuck a microphone in my face and said, pray, I would have ran out of the room or cried.
Yes. And youth pastors need to remember that. Volunteers we do stupid things like that in the church. Guys, I'm telling you, it's stupid. Let me stick you in a country, which I've done, which I've gone to, where I don't know the language, where I've taken students, and I really like going to third world countries where they don't know the language.
Yes.
Others will go, well, let's go to English-speaking countries. And I'll go, no, I like this because they're vulnerable now. They have to think. They have to pray. Oh, God, you got to get us out of this. We don't know how to communicate communicate to these people. We'd have translators, different things. But let's take these youth pastors who've never done this, these volunteers. Let's put you in a foreign country. That's exactly how the people in your youth group feel when you're talking about Jesus this, and he spoke to me that, and amen, everybody. A what? Hallow who? And we churchese them, and we expect, well, they'll just catch up or they're figured out. I mean, if they're spiritual, no. Jesus didn't even think that way or act that way. If we really talked like Jesus, thought like Jesus, we wouldn't be doing.
We'd be perfect. We'd be perfect people.
Oh my gosh, but we'd also be very practical. He was very practical in the way he loved people.
Right, and one of the best things she ever did for me was, I'll tell you this. When I was 21, I had my first boyfriend. We afforded ourselves a cruise ship right after college. And I remember being on the cruise with his best friend, that couple, another couple, and us. And right before dinner, one of the guys said, let's pray. And he prayed. And everybody went around the table and started praying. And it got to me, and I started crying.
Oh,
and my boyfriend at the time was like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I can't pray. And he was like, no, it's okay, just pray. And I'm like, you don't understand. That's like the number 2 scariest thing somebody can do to me is ask me to pray.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand Jesus. I don't understand God. I don't understand the Bible. Please don't make me do something that makes me feel so fake. And I would get mad at people because I was like, don't force me into this. And it was nothing against Christianity, nothing against any of it. I just was so scared of what I didn't know. It's like putting somebody on a stage that's scared to do public speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was like, please don't make me do something that will embarrass me. But once you understand, and once you have that feeling, and once you know God, and and you have that relationship, it's thoughtless.
Yeah.
And the way I started to develop that confidence, because everyone kept saying, you'll understand once you hear from God. And I was like, what does that sound like?
Don't know if I want to hear.
Right.
Sounds too scary.
Right.
Yeah.
And I started writing prayers every day.
Oh.
Handwriting prayers. And I remember the first time I got the book, a friend of mine wrote a prayer on the first page. And I remember the time that I wrote my first one, I kept looking back at hers and like, well, maybe you say this, and maybe you say this to him. And do I thank everyone? Should I thank everyone in my life? Like, I'm really confused about what I should say. And that was the very reason why I would cry when people would ask me to pray. Because I was like, I don't know if I should thank all my friends. Do I thank God first? Are people going to be like, oh, why did you say that? For kids, especially.
We judge in church.
Right.
Judge.
And if you
horrible.
think about how much kids care about what people think, imagine how scared they are to pray out loud because they're like, someone's going to judge me. Someone's going to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, or they're going to talk behind my back. I'd rather just not do this. I'd rather just not be involved with this church,
Jessica, you are the handbook. You need to. I wrote a little book on, which is not. I'm terrible about getting things published. I'm not a writer. I'm not any of those things. I come to find out the best authors are not writers, so I feel good now.
That's what a podcast is for.
Exactly right. And so, but I wrote the books first. God woke me up early. I don't like getting up early, but at 5 a.m. I'd start writing.
Wow.
And so short books, because I'm a youth pastor. I'm ADD. What do you expect? But anyway, but it was about the basics of student ministry. And so, but you're the handbook. Your story is the story that youth pastors need to hear, youth pastors need to read, because the things that you're saying right here are things that seminaries don't teach, that even young life, it takes years. It took campus life years to break me from old molds to put me into new molds, and it took God decades to keep teaching me that you don't know who you're dealing with. Let me deal with them. Stop trying to be superficial. Stop trying to be holy. I'll make you holy. You don't use somebody else's words, right? And all these things that you are, all these things that you're doing are what need to be in handbooks.
Have you ever heard anyone ever tell a woman you can't change a man? You just
that's a book. You can write that one too.
I just hear women complaining all the time, and people say, "Well, you just can't change a man," and because they have no desire to change. And I think about kids, and I'm like, we're in churches and we're in public schools, and we're thinking, well, these kids want change. Mm-hmm. No, they don't. They don't want to change. They have no desire to look at your life and go, that's the life I want. Because they probably, 80% of them think their life is pretty darn cool right now.
Yeah.
And they want nothing more than to be cooler.
And at age 25, if you're 18 and below, the person who's 25 just became really old.
Exactly. And their idols are people that we would never want their idols to be, unfortunately. Right. And so we can't change them from where we are. We have to step into their world. They have to trust us in their world. They have to believe in their world. They can tell us about their day. They can tell us about their life. They can tell us about the people that they spend their time with the most to bring on change, because we can't bring on change saying, hey, well, I go to church, 3 days a week and I have a Bible study that I think you should come to. And no, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to meet you at the McDonald's by your house and we're going to sit there. We're going to talk about your day and then we're going to spend 5 minutes on a Bible study talking about one thing that matters to me that I think would help you in your life. I'm going to meet you where you are. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. I'm just kind of enjoying the moment. So seriously, I mean, this is just a God sighting. We always talk about God sightings that I was taught that by youth missions group that I would go with, and they say, okay, today, why don't you look for a God sighting? We'll talk about it tonight. I'm going, I've never told my kids to do that. Oh, okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to use that. All right. And so that was, this is a God sighting. We were here. I prayed yesterday, hey, God, I don't know why I'm here. I know we need to learn more about podcasting, but, I've been in audio world and video world forever, and I got an editor, and I just need to fund this thing some way so I can keep doing it. But and then it wasn't, I don't know if we were there. I was there an hour. I was late for that meeting. And then they said, hey, talk or whatever. And you said, let's talk. Listen, there's two things that I would tell youth workers. It's one, what you just said is believe in the God sightings. I love that you called it that, because I just always say that was God. I always say that because I know it now, because I swear every time I get down on because a youth disappointed me, I said, go to this job interview and they didn't show up, or I've called them twice because I was supposed to come pick them up and they're not answering, or whatever it may be. And I think, you know what? I'm just tired of this. I'm burnt out. This isn't for me. I could be doing anything else in the world. Oh my gosh. God is so good at putting somebody in front of me and saying, no, this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I mean, from everything where I've been driving down the road and stopped at a stoplight and saw a kid from 2 years ago that I worked with walking down the street. I blew the horn. He jumped in my car and said, oh my God, I've been looking for your phone number for 3 months. I've been trying to get in touch with you. I need you. I need your help, and just God sightings. And I know in that very moment when I saw you and you said youth worker on fire, I said, first thing I said in my head was, oh my God, I would have written that podcast. I would, if I could have had one with that name, that's what I would have done. So I knew that fueled my fire. Well, and you're the fire. Yeah. Because, I've done this for a long time. I don't have the fire I had, but the people who have the fire, and I'm giving away the fire that I used to be able to have. When you get a certain, and by the way, church wanted me, I resigned from the last church I was at 29 years, but they kept telling me for 10 years that I was too old. My mentor was 70 years old when I was in my 20s, and he used to work for Billy Graham, and he used to go on high school campuses with a zebra top convertible because he had that kind of insight. And so he was my first mentor when he was 70 years old. And so I know that I haven't lost the fire, but some people like you that are really fresh to the fight, the fire is just like raging. Here's the best thing that God has to give our kids and that our kids don't understand is grace. And that's what I've learned. Is I remember sitting in that jail that night and going, that kid's mom could have came in here and said anything to me. She could have came in here and said, you used to teach my daughter and tell her all these great things, and you're in here for a DUI. Are you kidding me? That's what I expected. That's what I thought. That's not what she said. And in that moment, I knew that God had grace to offer. And that was God's grace, was saying, we get it. We're going to give you a second chance. Now make it work. And that's the part that I've loved so much and I've learned. And I think our kids need to understand that, is no matter how many times you mess up, he's going to come back every day and say, I'm here. I'm here. Are you ready? Are you ready? I'm here. And that's almost the same way our youth workers need to look at it. Yeah. It's you got to start with a fresh day every day with these kids, knowing that that's the type of attitude they need you to have. Yeah. I'm going to tell you this one story. I'm a Tim Tebow fan. People hate him. They love him. Of course, that's what you do when you love Jesus. Even Christians hate him and love him because they're from FSU, I guess, But anyway, he was speaking at a church in Lake County,
he was talking about one of his God sightings, and he said, I went to this prison. He said, and people want me to come. So he said, I went to cell after cell. He said, we're probably there for 5 hours. And he said, when we were leaving, I'm going, man, I'm so hungry. Is what he said. I'm hungry. I just want to leave. I'm tired now. Kind of had it in his mind that God was saying, ask him what's down that hallway. And he says, God, I don't want to go down the hallway. I want to go eat.
Right.
And he said, okay, what's down that hallway? And he said, oh, that's solitaire. He said, in fact, there's guys down there, they're waiting for death row, or they're waiting for something like that. He said, I need to go down there. They knocked on this one window because I think the guys can't come out, but they could talk through the window in their cells. He says, the guy starts crying, or he starts saying something like that, and he says, just want to let you know God loves you, or something like that. And he said the guy just started bawling. He's in there on suicide watch, death row, or whatever. And he said, I just got through telling God, if you're real, you send me somebody.
Oh my gosh.
And there was one of those things, you send me somebody. And he said, Tim was going, doggone it, all I want to do is go eat.
And I had to be that somebody.
Right, I just wanted to eat. He said, but it was here it was the last place. It was the last thing. You can't, you don't know where God's sightings are coming from.
You have no idea. And I remember talking to my girl the last 2 years when I was really trying to discover God. And I said, well, it's been a while and I haven't heard anything. I hear this, I read the Bible, but I don't feel anything. And she said, it's okay for you to ask God to show himself to you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I truly believe this, and anybody could discount me if they'd like, but I remember walking through an airport from a work trip, and I was by myself, and for some reason just praying, and I said, God, if you're real, present yourself to me. Show yourself to me. I want to understand you. I want to know you. Just please let me know you're there. I was pregnant at the time. And I ended up having my son 3 months early, and he was born less than 2 pounds. And the doctor told me, I can't promise you his survival. It's going to be an everyday thing. And I remember calling on my friend. I have a premature baby. They actually call them micro preemies. There's 75% survival rate, first child. And I remember her spending my friend who's a devout Christian, spending every day with me at the hospital. And she pulls me aside one night while I'm in the hospital, and she says, well, not pulls me aside, but she pulls up to my bed and she says, I know this is really hard for you to have that God talk right now, but I need you to understand that this is going to be part of your testimony. This is what you asked for from God. You asked him to show himself, and he's not going to show himself in the way you want him to. He's going to show himself in my son's name is Cameron, in Cameron's survival. And I said, nobody said he was going to survive. And she said, oh, that decision is already made. And she said, but he's going to show you through Cameron's survival. Just watch. And she said, here's what I don't want you to be scared of. She said, I want you to have faith in this process, but I don't want you to be scared to ask people to pray for him. Even though you're scared to pray yourself and you just started writing out prayers, pray for him every day, pray by his bed out loud and ask people to pray for him. And I did. I did. I never stopped asking. Every time someone asked me how he was, I said, just pray for him. Please just pray for him. He had blood transfusions and brain bleeds and a hole in his heart, and he grew out of all of it.
Oh, wow.
And he was released from the NICU 81 days later, and he is 5 months old now and healthy as ever.
Oh, my goodness.
And I know with everything in my heart that was the way that God revealed himself to me. He healed my child. He healed my son.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? And you wouldn't wish that on anyone. In fact, I get very upset with God because I'm going, now, wait a minute. You don't really have to do this way.
Right.
Can't you do something another way? I mean, really, come on.
But people don't want to admit the selfish part. But half of those nights I sat in bed going, God, I just started this process. Why would you do this to me?
Yeah.
What makes you think about this that I would believe you more if you do this to my son, Right. There were a lot of selfish conversations I had with God, and that was the part that I loved the most about my friend. And she kept saying, don't be afraid to have those selfish conversations with God.
Correct.
Ask him why.
Yes.
Ask him why he did this to you. Why did he let this happen? Why, if he was real, did this happen? He'll come forward. He'll let you know. It'll be part of your testimony. And I feel more more of a relationship with God now than I ever have. And not just because of the survival of my son, but because when I was praying for my son, it was the first time that I actually knew somebody was listening. I knew he was there listening. Mm-hmm. I could feel it. I knew I wasn't talking to myself.
You felt more secure than 5 doctors.
Exactly. Yeah. I even knew when they called me upset some days, I was like I finally learned what faith was. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have faith in anything. Mm-hmm. I always thought if you want it done, you do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you just do it really well and really hard, you'll make it work.
It'll work it out.
Yeah. And if it didn't work out, then you didn't do it well enough, you know? And I learned, and everyone always said, well, you just don't have faith. It's a joke my friends have because I'm scared of riding on airplanes. And they'll always say, well, you have no faith. and
we all have some kind of fear.
Right. And I learned what faith really was. It was just despite no matter what anyone said, that knowing that God had my son and he had my back. And, you know, no matter what happened, it was going to be the right thing that happened.
That's the tough part. No matter what happens. So wait a minute, God, come on. No, I don't want that other part.
Nope.
But let's say we're going to be happy if this part happens. The hard thing is being okay with whatever happens, that he knows the whole picture. And I still don't like that about him.
I've been telling people my whole life that I cannot speak to anyone else's the things that have happened to them. People have far worse stories than I could ever imagine enduring. But I tell people all the time, I know that God has been working to make me the most relatable servant on earth ever.
Well, you are so far on my podcast.
Because I know everything that I go through. When it's over, I'm like, I get it. It's because you want me to go work with these people, because there's no better way to understand somebody when you've very much been through it yourself. So I know I can work with youth because I've been up and down all of it. I can tell you why you're doing what you're doing. And
you firsthand know. Exactly.
And I had a premature baby so that I could help moms going through raising premature children, because it was one more thing that God taught me how to relate to people, you know. And I feel like we were just in a podcast session where somebody said something about they want to listen to podcasts where people have gone through something and solved it. Now I haven't solved everything, but I can tell you I've been through it firsthand, and I can be there with it through you the whole way. And I know that's what he's been doing with me, is making me a relatable servant to those people.
Absolutely. And once again, everything about podcasting is about being authentic. Well, we talk about that in Christianity all the time. You know, you got to be authentic, but we go to church and everything in there says you can't be authentic here.
Right.
You have to be authentic, but not in the church body on Sunday morning or Sunday night. You can't be authentic. We can't handle it.
Exactly.
We want something that's less authentic.
Please don't be yourself. Please don't be yourself.
That's right. Please be authentic as soon as you leave.
Right. Go be authentic somewhere else.
That's right. And don't let us know about it.
Don't talk about it. Don't share it.
That's right. It's just the opposite of Jesus. So anyway, Jesus freaks churches out. So
I like that. Yeah. So you talked about ski trips, and then so that brought to my attention. Actually, while I was scrolling your podcast, I was being a creeper on your podcast stories, and I saw a title about ski trips, and it's so funny because I work for AMIKids now, and what we do, we call them experiential challenge events, and 4 times a year we take all of these kids and take them somewhere that we know for a fact. So the cool thing about this is actually one of the coolest things about AMIKids that I love. Outside of second chances, outside of opportunities, these kids aren't behind fences. They're in school uniforms. They're not handcuffed. There's no fences. We take them all on 4 experiential challenge events a year, and they're all meant to be opportunities and exposure for these kids that are probably things they've never done. And so 2 of those trips, one of them is in the Highlands, North Carolina, and we take them whitewater rafting and rappelling.
Oh, I know Highlands. Great place. Yeah.
And the other trip is we take them scuba diving in the Keys.
Oh, yes.
On our boats.
Yes.
So we take like 300 kids a year in July on 12 to 15 boats.
You say 300 a year. How many at a time?
So it's all a week. We take them all on the same week.
All 300?
Yes. So
you're my hero. 70's my Mac.
Well, AMI stands for Associated Marine Institute. So we started as a Marine Institute and then became a full range educational and transformational rehabilitation program for.
I already love you guys just by the name. This is my wheelhouse. Go ahead.
For juvenile youth. And so we had boats because it was a Marine Institute. We were just teaching marine science. And so to this day, I might get the number wrong, but I would say at least 40-50% of our programs still have boats. So what we do is we take them down to the Keys. The kids travel separately. We meet down there with about 12, 13 boats. And we also have a boat yard where we have donated in boats that we lease. And so we take all these boats down to the Keys, John Pennycamp, and we take them scuba diving for a whole week. We even fly our kids in from Louisiana that are in Louisiana and New Mexico, and they all go scuba diving. And it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I went with them, and I had never been scuba diving, and I got certified with the group. But I met kids on the boat from Louisiana that had been practicing the whole year in a 12-foot pool. They'd never been in the ocean before.
Oh my goodness!
And they were far less scared than me. They were like, "Miss Jessica, let's go. Let's do 60 feet." And I'm like, "No,
no."
But they had no fear, and what it exposed them to. It was so cool watching them on the boat that week because you could tell they weren't their normal selves. And it's not like they were shy or anything. They were just in such a different environment. They had no desire to be like behaviorally obnoxious at all. They were so excited and obsessed with the idea of diving in the ocean and seeing a different world and, wearing flip-flops in the Keys. And I mean, it was just the joy on their faces and the exposure. Like, kids wait 6 months to a year to do this trip every year. They are so excited.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they did for our ski trips, too, to Colorado and different places. Yeah, absolutely. And kids who could never go anywhere.
Yeah.
Even though we had very wealthy kids, and they could pay a couple of people's ways, and I think sometimes they did. And then we had, those kids who, if we didn't take those trips and take them, they would have never gone anywhere.
Exactly. We have kids that we fly to this event, and they'll tell you, "I've never been on a plane in my life." That was the scariest thing I ever did. I've never been on a plane in my life.
Right.
And then we're putting them on a boat and taking them out in the ocean, and they're like, "I've never been on the boat, and I've never touched the ocean before." So it's a week of unlimited things that they've never done in their life that now they're going to experience all in a week. Then we take them up to North Carolina in September every year, or I think it's August.
These are the same kids. You're talking 300 of these kids again, students.
And we compete in whitewater rafting. They whitewater raft. They race down the river.
We've done some crazy wild things. We've been with 20,000 up in D.C. with evangelism training with teenagers running all over D.C. But this is different. But I only had my 70. And normally for a lot of events. And so when we're talking about an organization that's taking at-risk kids whose families could never do any of these things, these kids, if you hadn't done it, this would never happen in their life. Now, all of a sudden, they see the world in their brain. Their minds are exploding with, we can do anything now.
Exactly. And they write us thank you letters. I mean, this is a huge organization. Clearly, it's not my decision to do any of this. I just joined on for the ride.
Yeah.
But they write us thank you letters.
Welcome to the ride.
Right. The kids that write us letters talk about this forever. I just was in a meeting the other day where we were talking about how we need to use our alumni more. And somebody was saying that the alumni always ask about the challenge events. Mm-hmm. They'll be 30, 40, 50 years old because we've been around for 45 years, and they'll say, "You guys still do those challenge events?" Because we call them challenge events. Mm-hmm. Do you guys still do those challenge events? Because, I remember when I went rappelling, I'd never done it before. I haven't done it ever since. Mm-hmm. Or I went whitewater rafting and I don't even swim, or I went scuba diving and that was the best experience of my life. I tell my wife about it all the time.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking about how it's just it's the thing that we do that our kids will never, ever forget, ever.
And see, I like that because my dad wanted those things for us. And at 15, my oldest sister and I, we did a national tour in music because of XYZ happening. Those were all God sightings. And they said yes. And somebody else, and we were hired basically by this group. We saw your little band over here. We need that for our group in this tour. And my parents said yes. And another parent, who was one of the guys in our group, said no. And then at 18, he's putting me on a plane at 2 a.m., or flying to New York City at 2 a.m. by myself, not knowing how to get to my hotel at Madison Square Garden so I can rehearse the next day to fly overseas. And my parents have never done any of those things.
Wow.
So when you guys are like my dad on steroids. Right?
And these kids are fearless. They jump right into it.
And I became fearless because of those things.
That's my favorite part about it, is we're giving them an opportunity to show their true self, is to be fearless, because it's the same. Think about it. It's the same circumstances, and why all the reasons they're in trouble is because they think they're invincible. They think they're fearless, but they're just doing those things in the wrong environment. So you put them
they're
in
fearless in the environment that they're in because they've learned to be that there. And in reality, though,
it's a skill.
About being fearless, we're talking about courage, because courage is being afraid and still doing it.
The courage they have is a skill.
Yeah.
They're just doing it in the wrong environment. So imagine putting them in a different environment with that same skill, that same level of courage they have. I always look at those type of kids and I'm like, you have a level of courage that I don't think I ever had.
Right.
Because you're doing that stuff at home all the time, but you're not whitewater rafting. You're not scuba diving 60 feet and getting your master, or 100 feet and getting your master diver certification. You're not doing these daring things that would probably never make you think about doing those things at home again. It's the same courage. It's the same skill level. It's just in a different environment.
And it's a different genius level. They have these genius levels that have not been tapped into those resources, and these guys will end up doing worldwide changing. They're world changers, and your organization understands that. All they're doing is investing. They're basically doing high risk investment.
High risk investment.
We're talking about, you do the stock market. If you want to make the money, you high risk the money. And what you guys are doing is you're investing in high risk.
I love the high risk investment term. That's a great term.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we do.
Some business stuff.
That's exactly what we do.
Exactly. It is.
Because you do it for the one.
That's right.
You do it for the one.
Yeah, because you don't. Right. That's right. You don't know which one is going to be the next cancer researcher, the one who's going to cause peace in another country, the one who's going to save somebody out of that 50-story building. You don't know who those guys are, or who's going to push the next limit and build Tesla and put somebody, put the next rocket out. And this just happened.
And that's what I want.
Those guys are all those things.
And that's what I want youth workers to walk away with.
Absolutely.
Is understanding that you're right. It's just the one. And sometimes you'll go through 42 of them before you meet 43.
Or 142 of them.
Exactly, before they're going to be somebody. And you'll never know that on the first, the second, the third, or the 10th time you hang out with them or spend time with them. These aren't the kids that you see potential in the first 5 minutes, because they're going to show you the worst version of themselves up front. But looking at we have doctors in our alumni. We have, people that own construction companies in our alumni. We have people now that do bids, or are our vendors that are our alumni now. And then on a smaller scale, look at me. I was arrested 5 times before I was 19. I thought I was going nowhere fast. I want them to know that on a smaller scale, that youth could be me. I thought I was going nowhere fast, arrested 5 times before I was 19 and not knowing where I was going and playing victim. And now I have a master's degree and I'm 28 and I love my job and I have a son and I get to do exactly what I'm passionate about. And I love waking up to my job every morning. You could be with that 17-year-old right now.
Jessica, let me tell you something. Your story is the big story. It's the big story because you're the person that's going to help someone be the next rocket scientist. You're the person that's sacrificing days and years of their life, and you're doing lots of these people. There are going to be lots of diamonds you're uncovering. There's lots of doctors you're uncovering. And so you're more valuable than that one because you're the resource to find the one. Okay?
Right.
So I want you to know that.
Thank you.
Because I've done this for a lot of years, and that's when I'm hearing your story. If you're thrilling me right now, I've heard those stories. And by the way, I ended up doing way too many funerals for students. My mentor never did one that I know of to this day, and he developed cities, youth ministries in cities, Miami, Nashville, Orlando, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I mean, we're talking, Andy's huge in my life. And I said, Andy, I'm dealing with all these funerals. Have you got anything? This is the next one I'm dealing with. What should I say? He says, Doug, I don't know. But they were two of them were DUIs, a year apart, one a girl, one a guy. Both were these high-powered possible peoples. One had just gone to college, and she was at the University of Florida and was going to be a doctor. Her from a medical family. And a DUI, she wasn't even driving, but she was drunk, and they're not sure that something wasn't tampered with their drinks or whatever it was. Maybe she did it now, years later. So you are a miracle. It is a massive miracle that you didn't die during one of those events, because it happened to first a girl, then a guy. Both were 19, right out of high school.
Absolutely. I think about that all the time. It took me a while, but I remember my mom actually sat me down and said, you're lucky this happened to you. And I
when
was
you
like,
say your mom, you're talking about your adopted mom.
No.
You're talking about your real mom.
My real mom.
Oh, wow.
She didn't give me a whole lot of great advice, but she's always been the sweetest person in the world.
That's great.
Very, very influenced, very big follower of my father, but sweetest thing on earth. And she sat me down and said, you're really lucky this happened to you. And I was like, oh, am I? How is that? And she said, because most DUIs, somebody dies, or you could have killed yourself or someone else. Mm-hmm. Aren't you lucky that God found it fit for, well, she didn't say God, but that's the way I look at it. She said, aren't you lucky that life found it fit for you to get caught instead of you killing somebody or killing yourself? Mm-hmm. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth, is working with youth and seeing that they get themselves in mistakes that will change their life forever. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, I worked with two boys that stole a car, went joyriding, hit somebody, their car flipped over a bridge, drowned and died. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. They were 17 years old, facing life in prison for joyriding in a stolen car. I mean, you have no idea the mistakes you're willing to make and how they can amount and change people's lives forever.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, let's go back to the ski thing now.
Yep.
And tell me what you need to know. Are you guys doing that? Or are you wanting to know how to do that?
Oh, if we could take our kids skiing, that would be amazing. If we could add a 5th challenge event to this.
And you need to go to Colorado. You do. I mean, you could go to New Mexico possibly, but you need to stay Rockies, because you're pretty sure you're going to have snow in that way. Not only that, Don Holmes is who I'm going to hook you up with, was my travel agent for 20 years. I'll still use Don as long as he's not retired. He's out of the Dallas area. In fact, I'll try to look that phone number up, because we'll put it on the air. He's on one of my episodes. We talk about all of our trips and how we discovered each other and all this. So you can go find that and get that information there. But I'll keep looking at this while I'm talking. I thought it was the impossible trip. Here I'm a Florida guy from a smaller county outside of Orlando. Some of my friends who were actually music ministers, they did it for people like Young Life, Campus Life, and Freddie Langston. He and his wife, Lou, their son died of an aneurysm. He'd been kind of a wild child and was coming around and did a backflip after making a great play and landed on his feet, and he died. He had a brain aneurysm. And so
in that moment?
And so as a result, and nothing he did, it was just going to happen, and that's the moment it happened. And so they're known worldwide, and I call him because I want him for an event. And he said, well, this is what happened, but we're getting ready. Somebody's giving us an event. They want us to go to this groupless ski trip for youth pastors, and they pay our way, and we just have to get our plane tickets out. And I said, oh, man, that is awesome. I'd love to do that with you guys. But they said, well, you can. Here's Don's number. I went out with them and to Colorado. And I've been taking kids on the East Coast, but it's always hit and miss. West Virginia, snowshoes, the best place on the East Coast, by the way. Not easy to get to, but it is the best place in West Virginia. And not just in West Virginia, but we had guys from New England skiing down there, from Vermont and things like that. And it's less expensive than going to Vermont. I said, why are you here? They said, well, we like it as good as Vermont. And actually, it's like in a jet stream wind shear type place to where you get more snow there. But I go out with those guys, And after skiing one time in Colorado, my skills increased because bigger mountain, bigger skills. And you hit a mountain like that. But Colorado is more user-friendly. So anyway, here's Don's phone number. It's his mobile is 830-822-3120. That's his business mobile. So you guys have Don Holmes now. He is the best to set you up with whatever you want to do.
I've never been skiing, so I'm super excited to look into this.
Well, let me tell you, and his groupless.
So I can imagine how many of our kids haven't been skiing.
Yeah,
especially in Florida.
Exactly, and that's who we take, Florida kids. And so it's amazing how many people do go snow skiing from Florida. Though the deal with Don is that he has a heart for youth pastors. He has a heart for ministries. He did student ministry for a while himself, and his wife and he both do this with High Point Travel. They actually live in another place now, a few hours away from Dallas, but they're still with the company. People just go to them. They're off campus, and then the company has other people on campus. But Don's the mom. He's the guy. You want to know the guy.
Right,
well,
he's that guy.
He will set you guys up at whatever level you need to be set up. And when you go with Don, he's a straight shooter. He's going to make sure that you go to the right place, the right places, and to set you up in a way that will be user-friendly for you, both in the airfare, on the ground transportation, and on the mountain.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited for you. There's nothing like the mountain, because you've got the sea. We've done that. We've done the ocean. We've done, like we've done rappelling and different things with students, and it expands their horizon. I'm claustrophobic, so we've done spelunking along with the rappelling, and we call one place the birth canal right outside of Birmingham because you literally have to squeeze up through a natural corkscrew hole. Somebody at the top, unless you're an expert climber, has to pull you out. So we call it the birth canal.
Oh, no.
It's called the corkscrew.
Oh, no. I don't know about that.
but there's another one. You crawl into kind of a small hole, but then it opens up into like 3 football fields inside a cave down there. So, but there's nothing like snow skiing, though, and snowboarding. And but the key is they always get a lesson. And all of us wear helmets. You can't afford a helmet? We put a helmet on your head. We buy the helmet. We rent it. So everything's rentable. So that's all your stuff. That's what you need there. Jessica, this has been amazing. We obviously got to go to our next session. So
we've been having too much fun.
Too much fun. And so tell people how they can get in touch with you and with your organization and your podcast.
Of course. So the organization I work for is called AMIKids. You can find it at AMIKids.org for more information. When you open it up, you'll see Felicia Richard, America's Mom. She's our current spokesperson, and there'll be more information. We've got 44 programs across the U.S. So if you ever want to volunteer, please go to the website, and you can just hit the How to Get Involved button and write a message, and it'll come directly to me. You can also reach me at my personal email, Hurley, Hurley at AMIKids.org. And on a personal note, I am the host of a podcast called The Stranded, and it is all about people, the guests that I invite, being transparent about their most stuck, stranded phase in life and how they overcame that and what greatness looks like on the other side. And I think that's really, really important for people to be vulnerable about, so that other people can learn that stuck place in life is not forever, and it is actually what's going to make you the best version of yourself.
I don't get overwhelmed in too many podcasts because I pretty well know the people. I know how magnificent they are. But once again, you're a guide sighting for me. I know enough about people to know your story and what you told me, because your story is like about 10 or 12 people's stories combined. I've heard this one, that story, and that, and grew up students in this way and that way. This is amazing information. So, guys, make sure you write Jessica. Make sure you
please
text
reach out.
her. Reach out.
Any way I can help.
AMIKids. I didn't even know about the organization. That's stupid,
we're a best kept secret.
I'm telling you. So anyway, Don Holmes, and I can't wait for you to listen to his episode on mine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, listen,
I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. All right. Youth Worker Nation, we're out. Jessica, say goodbye, Youth Worker Nation.
Goodbye, Youth Worker Nation. Thanks for having me.
All right. And remember, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts. Just heard from our guy at Liberated Syndication, Lipson. But we're also on Stitcher. We're on Google Play. Tune in. And now we're on iHeartRadio. And my editor just told me we are now on Spotify. So, woo, right, we're there. You're going to find Jessica on all those places eventually if she's not there already. So, adios, Youth Worker Nation.
Thanks.
Youth Worker on Fire, we're out.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.